Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. As we welcome you once again to the airwaves of Salam Media and coming to you at a very, very critical time, at a very, very sad time as well. And sometimes it's actually difficult to describe the emotions that actually run through our veins and through our minds, and mixed emotions, anger, sadness, horror, expressing horror at what has actually happened. And it is Wednesday nights with myself in Wadi, and it is in conversation. And I'd like to actually begin with the words of Anas al-Sharif. And these are chilling words. These are words that will remain and that will remain etched in our memories for a very, very long time. And these were words that were written knowing at some point in time his life would be at stake. And in his words, he says, if these words reach you, Israel has succeeded in killing me. The last words of a journalist that was killed in Gaza. And together with Anas al-Sharif, we've seen so many journalists that have been killed in the past. The other day, we just looked at the statistics of the 195 that were killed, 181 were Palestinians. And Anas al-Sharif, together with 5 others, were killed after they were attacked in a tent outside the Shifa hospital in Gaza City. In fact, 7 people in total that were actually killed. And clearly this is sending a very, very chilling message, because when one looks at journalists, and particularly journalists the caliber of Anas al-Sharif and all the other brave Palestinian journalists, they are basically the last line of defense when it comes to the truth, when it comes to reporting live from a genocide zone. And this is what we are talking about tonight, this brutal silencing of journalists, this relentless targeting of journalists in Gaza. And this is the reason why we have assembled a panel this evening once again, consisting of Dr. Yvonne Ridley, who is a UK-based journalist, Zanele Mji, investigative journalist, no stranger to Salam Media, and also joining us out of Ramallah this evening, Dr. Juman, Quneis, lecturer of media at the Birzeit University out in Ramallah. And while we're waiting for Dr. Yvonne Ridley, it's time to welcome both our guests. Dr. Juman Quneis, Assalamu alaikum, welcome, and we appreciate your time.
Wa alaikum salam, thank you for having me tonight.
And Zanele, as always, you're welcome, and we can't get enough of you on the airwaves of Salam Media, it seems, but we do really appreciate your time with us.
It's good to be with you again, even if the circumstances are not pleasant.
Absolutely. Dr. Juman, let's begin with you. And, we've seen the systematic targeting of journalists for a very, very long time. And I also recall the time when Shirin Abu Akli was actually murdered and nobody was held accountable. And this assassination is a system. In fact, it's given a new word, which is part of the genocide, and let's call it genocide, for want of a better term, because journalists in particular have been targeted. And I'm sure this came as a shock to you as well, because we've seen the horror amongst all horrors unfolding, where a whole group of journalists were now targeted, assassinated, or brutally murdered all at the same time.
Yes, of course. Yes, of course. Yes. Of course, you know that war crime prosecutions depend on timely and verifiable documentation. So each silenced journalist weakens the chain of evidence that could be used in future courts. That's why Israel wants to silence these journalists. If you look at the numbers, they are really horrible. Israel has killed more journalists in Gaza than, look at, US Civil War, World Wars I and II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the wars in Yugoslavia in the 19s and 2000s, and the post 9/11 war in Afghanistan combined. So this huge number, they want just to destroy, as you said, the first line that reveal the truth about what's going on in Gaza, because they are the witness. They are the only witness. You know, the siege on Gaza, it's imposed on Gaza since 2006. So the only witnesses that document the war, and especially now the genocide, are the Palestinian journalists. So that's why we could understand why they are targeting them. And I said that yesterday in your very well respected radio. We will witness more killing of journalists in Palestine. We will witness more because they didn't stop. They say that openly and publicly, and they document that they are targeting journalists. They say that. They don't hide it. So that's why we will witness more if if we don't see a real stance against what's going on against the journalists in Palestine, and especially in Gaza.
Thank you for that, Dr. Juman. Zanele, it is clear that for us that are outside of Palestine, for journalists in many other parts around the world, including South Africa, it is clear that this has sent shockwaves, because it is also clear that this was not a case of crossfire where they were mistakenly killed. This was an assassination. This was a killing with precision. This was targeted. This was a deliberate erasure of journalists to actually stop them from telling the truth. And we've seen that even to the extent that they will annihilate an entire Al Jazeera crew in Gaza City.
Yeah. I mean, I think for all of us as journalists around the world, we are aware of the gravity of this and what it means for the entire journalistic community internationally. I think especially if there is no consequences or prosecutions for what has been done, I fear for the precedent that this has set in terms of what governments can get away with, the blatant war crimes of deliberately targeting journalists. I mean, 2 years ago when this attack on Gaza and on Palestine initially ramped up, October 7, in the beginning there was excuses, like you said, or maybe they were in crossfire, or they were in the wrong place, or we warned them to get out. But as things have gone on, I think Israel has just gotten even more blatant about taking ownership of the fact that, yes, we targeted them, and kind of giving this flimsy propaganda story about Hamas. And they don't even really need to account any more than that, than to just make that accusation and kind of move on. So I think this is a very terrifying turning point, not only for Palestinians who now essentially are facing a media blackout as the assault on them escalates, but it's also just a terrifying moment for journalists around the world, because none of us are safe.
Yes. And also, Dr. Juman, when one, and you would know better than us, when one looks into the life of a Palestinian journalist, and particularly the journalists out in Gaza at this point in time, paying a very high price at a great cost, the cost of their families. If I look at Anas al-Sharif as an example, at the cost of the life of his father, the separation from his mother, the separation from his own family, his wife, his children. Yet, when one goes into the mind and the psyche of the Palestinian journalist like Anas al-Sharif, he was one of the most profound voices of late. He refused to look away. For 23 months, he focused, he concentrated on reporting on the killing, the destruction of every thread of life in Gaza, and at the end of the day, documenting this genocide in the detail that the world needs to know. And this is just one example in Anas al-Sharif. and I'm sure all the other journalists that have been killed, again, one looks into their mindset, one looks into their psyche, and this they've seen as a huge sacrifice, not only to themselves, but for the people of Palestine.
Exactly. And this is the sin of Anas Sharif in the eyes of the Israelis. Is the sin is that he was documenting what's going on in Gaza. Anas lives in Gaza City and he refused to leave Gaza City, which is a very, very dangerous place. And he was asked to leave and to be displaced, but he insisted to stay there and document what's going on there. So he's very courageous. And as you mentioned, if we look at him not only as a journalist but as a human being, he's a father and he's a husband, and he used to see, rarely he used to see his family and his kids, and he preferred to do his job properly and honestly, as he mentioned is his in his will. All of these journalists are working in very hard circumstances. We are not talking about the dangerous areas only. We are not talking about being targeted by the Israeli bullets and shells only. We are talking about the minimum needs of a journalist, like electricity, internet connection, even jackets, flicker jackets, microphones, cameras. All of these things, there is lack in these rigs, in these small things, and the majority of them lost their families. Not only Anas Sharif, Muhammad Qreqi, who was with him as well, he lost his mother, and she stayed under rubble for months and months, and he was reporting her funerals. Many of them, witnessed things like this and faced things like this. Also, their families that were targeted. So to make pressure on these journalists just to stop talking, just to stop filming, to stop reporting, it's a big pressure they lived under. And even journalists who were injured, such as Muhammad Hassan Slayah, he was in a hospital, in a room, in a hospital. He was receiving treatment, and then he was targeted. So none of them is safe. Because of the electricity I mentioned and the internet connections, which are cut off from Gaza, as you know, and all the media headquarters that were destroyed, they stay in tent where everybody can see the signs of TV or press or something like this. These things should be neutralized according to humanitarian law. So that's why they stay there where they have internet connection, where part of batteries or something like this, just to work. And even though they target them, as I mentioned, on the high level of the Israeli officials, they declared that Anas Sharif is targeted, and they have a list. Actually, they have a list of journalists who are accused by being part of this military group or that. And these are lies, because lots of people asked, even not from Palestine only, advocates, lawyers ask Israel to prove that, to present any evidence proving that Anas or other journalists are part of these military groups. They didn't give any evidence. So these are lies. We know the lie already. We already know the lie about any person targeted by Israel. It's in advance. We know it in advance.
Absolutely. And I think, Zanele, just to echo the sentiments of Dr. Juman Quneis, where you were privileged when we had Yumna Al-Said come to South Africa, the Al Jazeera journalist. And we can actually concur what Dr. Juman is actually saying with regard to the conditions and the dire conditions that the Palestinian journalists are actually made to work, and simple things that we take for granted, internet connections, charging your phone, all of these have been very, very challenging but despite that, they have been relentless in their work, in their efforts. They have been resourceful as well, and also to the cost of their lives. And as Dr. Juman alludes to as well, the threats on their lives hanging over their heads all the time. And I recall Yumna Al-Said mentioning this as well, where she was actually threatened. And I think, you know, you hosted her at that media briefing. So I'm sure, Zanele, there's a lot that you can identify with when we talk about this latest massacre of these journalists.
Absolutely. And you actually read my mind. I was literally just thinking about how it was about a year ago around this time. And back there, and I mean, more than 100 Palestinian journalists have been killed in the time since. But that conversation with Yumna was so powerful because, like you say, she brought to life the reality of just how terrifying and stressful it is. I remember her talking about the guilt and the fear that she felt for the fact that her neighbors, her family members, the people who she was close to around her automatically became targets because of the work that she was doing. She spoke about how difficult the thirst that they were experiencing, you know, the limited access to water, the stress of moving up and down, getting phone calls with little warnings saying, move, go here, go there, you know, trying to take care of children under those circumstances. So yes, I think Yumna really, that was the moment that I realized, and things have only gotten so much worse since. I now imagine, you know, journalists working under the conditions of starvation that they are working under. And I think that's why Anas's entire life story and everything that he did is so powerful. I mean, I was looking at an image of him as a young boy, standing around a journalist who was reporting on the 2008-2009 Israel attack on Gaza, and he was kind of standing there as a young boy watching this journalist report, and his life is just such a symbol of what Palestinians have gone through and what Palestinian journalists in essence have gone through. He has lived this reality his entire life. He has witnessed it all, the displacement camps, the bombing, all of it, and still was so steadfast, was so strong, was so dedicated till the very end. It's really humbling to consider the immense commitment and honor that our colleagues have shown in Palestine.
Yes, certainly, Zanele. And also, Dr. Juman, the fact that you mentioned that they are human beings and they are humanitarians, journalists as well, and also many other people who provide support to the people of Palestine, whether we're talking of aid organizations, aid workers, doctors, medical workers, all of them, at the end of the day, they are human beings who are personally affected as well, because there are many that are concerned. And with the famine that has obviously been enforced on the people, they are also worried about their families. How are their children going to eat? They don't see their children for days as well. And also, like, for example, in the case of Anas as well, we've seen the visuals of him breaking down on air. And journalists are supposed to not show any emotion. But yeah, we had a journalist that actually broke down on air, crying when a woman collapsed of hunger right in front of him. And together with that, the other support, carrying bodies of people at their funerals. And, you know, these are what they are subject to. And this is the type of work that they are doing. So again, you know, they've given a new meaning to what true journalism is, what humanitarian journalism is, and what journalists should be doing as activists and as part of the job of just reporting on what they see around them.
Exactly. As you mentioned, to be honest, Anas and all the journalists in Gaza are not as what journalists do usually when they go to conflict areas. I know many colleagues who were in Iraq, for example, or in Afghanistan. Usually their commissions send them to safe hotels, and they stay there, and they have all the services of internet connection or electricity, food, and all of these things. But journalists in Gaza are not. They are not in the same circumstances. They are starved. They are targeted. They are thirsty. their families are targeted, and they are part of the people. And that's why I think that they are very honest, and their messages are very true, and they are real witnesses of what's going on there, because they are part of the people, because they are part of the problem, part um, of the war. I mean, like, so if when Anas saw and cried, when a woman collapsed there, because he was hungry as well, because his wife was hungry as well, his neighbors were hungry as well. And when he cried, when he saw children accumulated in bodies, full of blood, and their pieces are here or there, because he saw his children in their, instead of them, because he sometimes he used to know these people, because sometimes they were his neighbors or his friends. And just to remember, he bid farewell to many journalists before him. They were correspondents to Al Jazeera, and they were killed. And so that's why he felt exactly, with anybody, he reflected all the feeling and all the suffer of these people. So that's why I think that's why the Israelis were angry, especially with that woman who collapsed after she was starved. They were very angry. They talked about that a lot in their media. They think that because they deny the starvation and the famine in Gaza. They say that it's fake and AI generated photos. That's why, and it was in front of his eyes. So that's why they were very angry with this special incidents. And that's why I think that if you look at many journalists, I don't know if you watch all the channels, but sometimes in some Arab channels, we have seen some journalists who collapsed because they are starved, because they haven't eaten anything since days, and they were thirsty. And some of them had that fear to an extent that they bring their children with them just to be safe, that just to feel safe, that they are not in a tent where they could be targeted, because they know well that the Israelis could target the families deliberately, because they know that these are the families of that journalist or this. And this is what happened also with medics, doctors, and civil defense people. And yeah, all of them are targeted. But we are talking about journalists today.
Yeah, certainly. And I think, Zanele, while we are talking about journalists, let's just talk about journalists outside of Palestine. Let's talk about media, mainstream media in particular. And since this genocide had actually unfolded and began, it has been about manufacturing consent, which is the one thing, to justify the genocide. And the second issue is about the control of the narrative. And I think this is absolutely critical for us to understand. Is initially we saw mainstream media controlling the narrative, but as this genocide continued, as it became more brutal, it started awakening many journalists, many people right across the entire world. And there were many narratives that were debunked. And to a large extent, it is through these brave Palestinian journalists where in real time, almost immediately, a lot of these narratives were being debunked.
True. I mean, it's, one doesn't want to critique or slam their colleagues, right? In our industry, we want to maintain a level of loyalty to each other. But I do have to say that in a lot of ways, it feels like too little, too late, in terms of some of the more recent acknowledgements and changes of heart that we've seen from journalists and media companies. And I'll speak specifically about the media here in South Africa. I do have to express my disappointment, after, in the wake of the incident that happened, over the last few days this week, I've just been keeping an eye on the various reports coming out of South African media houses and publications on this targeted killing of Anas and his colleagues. And at this late stage, there's so many publications that are still not calling this what it is, a genocide. It's still being referred to as this sort of two-sided war. Other publications that kind of hold back from saying that these journalists were deliberately targeted and killed. It's like the type of wording that's used. So I have to be honest with you. And I mean, in other ways, we're doing what we can. I'm so proud of my colleagues out in Cape Town. They were on the streets today, marching in solidarity. Tomorrow here in Johannesburg, we're all going to get together for the same reason. But I do also have to say that a lot of the reporting, even up until this point, has continued to not be strong and clear enough about what exactly is going on and using the right words specifically.
Thank you for that, Zanele. I see Dr. Yvonne Ridley has joined us as well. Dr. Yvonne, assalamu alaikum and welcome.
Salam, and thank you for inviting me, but it's a very sad occasion, Inayat. There are protests and memorials around the world, as more people are calling for accountability from Israel. But I still think that the main media outlets are not protesting enough. The BBC, CNN, even Fox News, they should all be coming together. And this is the targeted assassination of journalists. And not only that, but some of these news outlets went and repeated the defamatory statement, the ridiculous statement that Anas al-Sharif was a commander from Hamas. I've worked in war zones. I've been through these killing fields, and trust me, journalists who are on these beats are working 24/7. They have irregular hours. They have to react to the news. And this is an ongoing genocide that is going on 24/7. Evil never sleeps. So to suggest that Anas al-Sharif was doing random shifts as a Hamas commander, which I would also imagine would be a very demanding job, to suggest that he was holding down two jobs at once is a nonsense. I've had the privilege of working with Al Jazeera journalists, and I know how hard they work. And this is, in fact, I don't even know if they have any journalists left now on the ground in Gaza, because the Israelis have murdered so many journalists, more than 250 now. And it really, somebody has to be held accountable for this.
Thank you for that, Dr. Yvonne. And let's bring Dr. Juman back into the discussion. Dr. Juman, I think, just listening to what Dr. Yvonne is saying, and we've engaged with Dr. Yvonne many times previously as well, even with regards to Afghanistan as well. But just to look at Israel and the narrative and the mere fact that independent journalists have not been allowed in to Gaza. And we've seen from time to time a crew reporting from a military plane, for example, when Israel was when they were dropping humanitarian aid into Gaza. But again, at the same time, stopping or barring them from filming any of the devastation that had taken place below. Now, that alone is another clear example that hiding away from international crews, from journalists who are supposed to be there, again, telling us again that Israel will go to any lengths to actually justify their actions, as has been the case with Anas al-Sharif, labeling him as Hamas, creating manufacturing consent, as I had mentioned as well, to justify his assassination.
I just want to add to what your wonderful guests said about the implicit of the international media and taking part of Israel. This is the Bild newspaper in Germany who entitled that there is a terrorist journalist killed in Gaza. They just adopted the Israeli narrative before proving that that Anas was part of Hamas or not. So they entitled that yesterday. I mean, like the next day of the killing of Anas. So they adopted the narrative of Israel. This is unfortunately what we find sometimes in some media outlets, not only ignoring the Palestinian story, not only ignoring the Palestinian narrative, but also adopt the justification, the narrative, the declarations of Israel. And this is not journalism. Actually, this is not neutral of how they handle, how they tackle issues. Yeah, I think that what you asked about, when journalists are maybe allowed to take photos of Gaza Strip from above. I mean, like I feel like it's just funny. We have hundreds of and thousands and maybe millions of photos proving that Gaza is not Gaza, Rafah is not Rafah, Khan Yunis is completely destroyed. People could not recognize the streets that they used to live in, and we have it's mainstream, it's live, it's online now. We see everything in front of our lives, and we don't need the proof of these journalists who are accompanying these pilots who are dropping aids to Gazans. So I think that so just if they are I mean, like Israel doesn't allow to journalists who are from outside Palestine or international journalists to go to Gaza and to go to interview people. But in my opinion, it's important. It's very important just to prove that what's going on is real, is truth, because it's denied by Israel. It's, as I mentioned, it's said that it's not a genocide. It's not. They are not starving. There's no. There are AI generated photos, but let the journalists get in Gaza, and if they don't let them get in, they can lie. They can spread their narrative. They can. Do whatever they want, and we know very well that Israel has a very developed machine of media where they spread their narrative in many languages to all over the world, hiding whatever they want, telling whatever they want, changing the truth, changing the photos, doing and accusing everybody of being Hamas or part of military groups. And unfortunately, the journalists who could go there and see with their eyes what's going on in Gaza, they are not allowed to go. And then I think it's really a catastrophe, because even if they are allowed, after all of what happened in Gaza, even if they are allowed to go to Gaza now, lots of things are missed, and lots of things are not documented. And this is very important for any war crime prosecutions, which will, I think that we will feel that gap one day when we will think of the war crime prosecutions, if we will work on that, or anything would happen with ICJ or any international court.
Yes, Zanele, and I think just following up from what Dr. Juman is saying, and one of the reasons why South Africa has succeeded in actually taking this matter to the ICJ is to rely on the testimonies of many of these journalists and what they have been saying throughout this genocide. And also in the words of Anas al-Sharif, saying that I have lived through pain in all its details, tasted suffering and loss many times, yet I never once hesitated to convey the truth as it is, without distortion or falsification. And I think for me, that is so profound when one looks at it in the context of genocide, because this is the harsh reality, this is the truth, and this is the truth that actually stands out. And this has actually woken up the world, because when one looks at Anas al-Sharif, for example, for the last 23 months, he entered the homes of millions of people. He entered the hearts of millions of people. And this is the reason why Palestinians remember him as their voice to actually tell their story.
You know, one thing I will say, Inayat, is that even as there's not been a month that has passed since October 7 where multiple journalists have not been killed, and even as they have been diminishing so greatly in their numbers, even in the wake of the last of the Al Jazeera journalists in Gaza being killed, we are still every single day seeing images out of that area, right? We watched Anas carry the body of one of his colleagues, and then we watched Palestinians carry the body of Anas. And I say this to say that we have one thing we can learn from Palestinian journalists is that this is not just a job that one chooses. These people were born truth tellers. They were born committed to documenting and telling the story. And unfortunately for the Israelis, the next generation of Anases and Hossams have already been born, are already going to grow, are already starting to tell the story, and are already going to continue the legacy and follow in the example that they set. So as disturbing and disheartening and heartbreaking as this is, I really truly do believe in the resilience of the Palestinian people, and I truly believe that we will continue to see stories come out of there, and there will be more journalists who, inspired by what they have witnessed over the last 2 years and even longer, will rise up and keep telling these stories.
Well, I think, what you're saying is so important, and I'd like Dr. Yvonne to actually comment on what you have said, because on the one hand, we know that this is part of the preparation of the final plan, Dr. Yvonne, by Benjamin Netanyahu, in terms of the erasure of journalists, and to get to a point where no one will be left to actually tell the story of brutality, of this genocide. And they have seen that journalists are dangerous for their propaganda machines. But as Zanele mentioned, that we are talking through generations of Palestinians, over 70 years, 7 decades, where we've seen multiple generations that have been subjected to brutality in almost every aspect of their lives, the generational trauma that they've suffered as well. Yet, they still stood out as beacons. They stood out as lights to basically tell the truth. And it's not going to stop with the killing of Anas al-Sharif and all the other journalists before him.
No, these journalists did an excellent job. They not only told the story of what was happening in Gaza, they lived it as well. From the hunger, from leaving home, from being displaced, to enduring the relentless bombardment. These journalists gave us a unique perspective that most war correspondents aren't able to do. And they were talking about their country, their people, their land, and their testimony was so powerful. And now, who is going to bear witness from inside? As I say, I'm not sure who's left in Al Jazeera now, but I do know that millions of Arabs around the world tune in to the Arabic side of the channel. And Anas was their friend. He was the person that they engaged with in Gaza. And when he was so brutally cut down, people were in tears across the Arab world because they felt as though they had lost a friend, somebody that they could rely on to give them the truth, to tell them what was happening on the ground. And I watched a small video yesterday of his daughter, a really gorgeous little girl, mashallah, and to listen to her. And she told us how she prayed for her father's safe delivery every day because his job was so dangerous. And it wasn't, you know, he wasn't a soldier. He wasn't, his job was dangerous because he told the truth. And Israel cannot handle the truth. And we see that from their professional liars, and that's what I call them, in the IDF and from Netanyahu's office. And they stand there in front of the TV cameras and they just bombard us with lies and then sneer and look down on the likes of Anas al-Sharif, whose only crime was to tell the truth, the unvarnished truth of what life was like in Gaza. And I do worry now about who is going to be the eyewitness, because we don't want embedded journalists going in. They will only give one slice of what is actually happening. We want impartial journalists going in. And I'm afraid that impartiality is something which is very rare on the ground at the moment in Gaza.
Thank you for that, Dr. Yvonne. To all the panelists, I'm going to put you on hold. I need to go for a quick air break and we'll be back.
Searching for elite local and international investment and advisory services from an award-winning firm? Look no further than the Belmont Meyer Group, your gateway to unparalleled investment and wealth management. At Belmont Meyer, we believe in the art of wealth creation, a meticulous process fueled by our unwavering commitment to excellence. With a focus on providing elite alternative investments and quality advice, we also pride ourselves on maximizing value for our esteemed investors, as seen through our consistent outperformance. Your financial success is our top priority. Join us at Belmont Meyer and experience the difference firsthand. Ready to embark on a journey of greatness? Contact us today. Reach out to the Belmont Meyer Group on 078 786 1698. Call or WhatsApp or email us at info@belmontmeyer.com. Elevate your financial future with Belmont Meyer, where every detail matters.
In South Africa, countless numbers of sick patients leave their homes at the crack of dawn to join long queues at clinics and public hospitals, many of them suffering pangs of hunger in addition to the symptoms of disease. The Al Imdad Foundation's Slice for Life teams deliver sandwiches to these patients at more than 40 hospitals and clinics across the country. Help us to keep on relieving hunger. Donate online at alimdad.com or call 0861 786 243 for more information.
Discover the Africa of your dreams and surround yourself with her spectacular beauty. Relax beneath her serene sunsets and explore wildlife at its natural best. It's where the pride of Africa comes together. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve. Get to know the Big Five or cruise on an elephant safari game drive. Interact with lion and tiger cubs and enjoy world-class halal cuisine while we pamper you during your 5-star stay. Indulge in the true African experience. For reservations, call now on 042-203-1400 or visit kwantu.co.za. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve, the place of gathering.
Penny Appeal's Education First campaign helps children to get access to quality education.
I'm 14 years old. When I grow up, I'd like to be a scientist.
We believe every child belongs at school,
And we want education, a better education.
learning and dreaming their way to a better future. With your help, we can provide classrooms, desks, stationery packs, and school shoes. Help make these dreams a reality. Visit www.pennyappeal.org.za or call 031 1100 573. Penny appeal. Small change, big difference.
Shimmer, sparkle, captivate. Nothing less than a masterpiece. Droplets of gold inspires precious design. Platinum bursts with intricate freshness, and every pure diamond becomes more than just a girl's best friend. Voda Gold Gem Jewelers, where timeless dreams become a reality. Come to us. We tailor-make designer gold, platinum, and diamond jewelry. Trade in or remodel your old gold. Clad yourself with classy name-branded watches. We offer insurance valuation and freezer card calculation. Visit us at 534 Ridge Road, Overport, or call 031 208 9142. Voda Gold Gem Jewelers, manufacturers of fine gold and diamond jewelry.
Conveniently located along the banks of the Crocodile River bordering the Kruger National Park. As a guest at Buckler's Africa Lodge, one can enjoy an amazing sunrise or sunset on our spacious deck area while you catch a glimpse of some wildlife sightings along the Crocodile River. The sounds of the African savannah will greet you whilst you enjoy your morning coffee. Buckler's Africa Lodge by Tingana Collection.
Listen to something fresh. Listen to Salam Media.
Well, we continue our discussion this evening in conversation with myself, Inayat Wadi, and we are talking about the brutal silencing and relentless targeting of Palestinian journalists and against the background of the targeted killing of the journalists from Al Jazeera. And one thing that we need to also be aware of is these are human beings. And on August the 10th, the day that Anas al-Sharif was killed, he wrote on X, and he spoke about losing his strength and ability to express himself when he arrived at a scene where body parts and blood were all around them. Corpses were scattered on top of each other. And he said, "Tell me what words and phrases could help any journalist describe this horrific image. When I told you on air that this was an indescribable scene, I was truly helpless in the face of this horrific sight." And Dr. Juman, I'm sure many a journalist, we've spoken to a number of journalists in South Africa whom we brought on tour. I asked the same question once to Yumna Al-Said when she was in South Africa. I asked the same question where we had a photojournalist, Hamza Shalan, who came to South Africa. I asked the same question to Bilal Khalid when he was recently here in South Africa. And they all have a story to tell in terms of what they have witnessed and how they find it even so difficult to describe the horror amongst all horrors that they've seen. And this is a huge lesson. It's a massive lesson, as Zanele mentioned. There is a lesson for us as journalists in terms of what they've seen. And it's not only about what they've seen and experienced, it is how it is affected and impacted them on their personal lives as well.
Yeah, I think that I have 3 friends who were killed by the Israeli occupation. And one of them is Shireen Abu Aqle. She was my friend. She was my best friend, actually. And we were surprised when she was killed because usually she takes all preparations, all instructions that any journalist has to do when he or she goes to the field. So, and then we got to know that the sniper, the Israeli sniper, targeted her in the neck between the helmet and the vest. So he wanted just to kill her, and there was no conflict at that time. And another friend who was killed, he used to work. We used to work together in the PBC and the Palestinian Broadcasting Corporation, and he was targeted in Ramallah street. It was a peaceful demonstration against the siege imposed on Yasser Arafat at that time. And the other one, he was fixing the antenna for the Palestinian radio after it was bombarded by Israel. So, many of journalists in Gaza, we know each other on phone because we are not allowed to go to Gaza and they are not allowed to come to West Bank. So this is one of the consequences of the siege between people, and we can't report about Gaza and they can't report about West Bank. And I would like to mention two things actually. First, the Palestinian journalists are not targeted now only, not when Shireen Abu Akleh was targeted. It's very old story. In the 60s and the 70s, the Palestinian journalists were targeted. They used to work outside Palestine, in Lebanon, in Britain, in many countries. So I would like to remember, for example, Najil Ali, who was killed in London, and Ghassan Kanafani, who was killed in Beirut in the 70s. And these were killed by planned operations to kill them. I mean, like, it's not a new story. It's new. It's not new. It's an old story. Always they want to silence every sound, every voice against the genocide, against the killing, against the oppression. But what I would like to mention, as a teacher at Birzeit University, as a lecturer there, I teach lots of young people in Palestine. And after Shireen was killed, I noticed that there is more people who want to study journalism. And to be honest, I have done like a small, let us say, survey with the new students. All of them said that we are inspired by Shireen, especially female students. They said that we are inspired by Shireen Abu Akleh. We are inspired by her. She's a hero. We want to be like her in the future. We want to tell the story as she used to do. And to be honest, in my lecture, usually her name is mentioned, although she's much older than them. But they go to the internet, to the Al Jazeera website, and they see and they watch her reports, and they want to do like her. And now, yesterday, there was a vigil at Birzeit University, organized by that group of young students, young future journalists, who are aware of all what's the dangerous situation that they are living in, and the responsibility they have on their shoulders, that they have to deliver the message about Palestine and what's going on. Because if they don't do that, other people, as our great friend, our great guests here mentioned, Dr. Yumna, impartial journalists will come and tell the story, and we don't know if they will tell the full truth or not. So I think that, yes, I think that in the future we will have more journalists, maybe more courageous than Anas and Shireen and all of these people, because they have witnessed the killing of these witnesses, and they want to prove that they have honorable work, which is journalism, which is telling the truth and only the truth. You can guess that, you can find that by looking at the activists in Gaza, small, very young people who are holding their phones and filming and spreading the photos only for people who are starved, who are on checkpoints bringing flour bags. And these children, they just mention, they just film, they just taking photo about what's going on. And I think that we will have lots of great journalists in Palestine in the near future.
Well, certainly, and we hope so. And I think, Zanele, this actually just confirms from Dr. Juman, in terms of what you are saying, in terms of the inspiration that these journalists like Anas and many of the other journalists who have been killed actually bring to young people. And, I would like to cite the example of another young journalist, the 22-year-old Abu Bakr Abed. And I recall him describing a very difficult decision that he had to actually make to leave Gaza so that he could pursue his education in Ireland. And it was at a point, which was just 6 months ago, where he wasn't only suffering from malnutrition, but he was concerned that his work as a journalist would make him and his family targets of this brutal genocide. And they've had to go out, but I'm sure going out, furthering his studies again, we will be looking at a new breed of journalists that have learned some very bitter lessons from this genocide.
Absolutely. I love that Dr. Juman has confirmed what I feel, which is that our colleagues in Palestine have set a new standard for journalism. And even me personally, I have been influenced and inspired to really dig deep into what my commitment to my job is. In fact, I spent the day today out reporting in a part of Joburg that was unfamiliar, somewhere that I had been warned was very, very dangerous, and I was told, get home before sunset. And as I pulled up to my house and got home, I did spare a thought for the kind of work that's being done in Palestine, where, as Dr. Yvonne said, it's relentless. It's 24 hours. They don't clock off. And I feel that their legacy has set a whole new standard for all of us as journalists in terms of the kind of commitment that we can show, and also just in terms of the kind of love that we can be fueled, the love of our people, the love of our land. Like you said in the beginning of the conversation, journalists are expected to be impartial and neutral and non-emotional. But the lesson that we have learned from every single Palestinian journalist is your work is your calling. Your work is activism. Your work is an act of love. There's no such thing as being cold and removed from the work you're doing. In fact, your love of your people and of justice and of the truth should push and fuel you. And there's no such thing as being impartial in situations where people are blatantly being targeted and victimized and tortured.
Certainly, Zanele, and also Dr. Yvonne, we have been saying this for a very, very long time, that the genocide in Gaza will determine what the new world order will be like. And this includes the field of journalism. And when Zanele speaks about a new standard for journalism, we're seeing a lot of evidence of this already, where many journalists are starting to look at things differently. Not everything is black and white. Many are actually starting to read between the lines as well. Many have come to terms with the fact that Israel is running two campaigns in Gaza. One obviously is the military control of the Gaza Strip, but also another for the narrative control on how the world understands what is happening. And we are starting to see a lot in terms of a different understanding, very different to what Israel actually wants the world to understand. And as a seasoned journalist yourself, Dr. Yvonne as well, these new standards are starting to surface.
Well, I think that the quality of journalism coming out of Palestine is such that we can now see Israel in all of its awfulness and all of its duplicity and treachery, and it is now a pariah state for no other reason than these heroic journalists who have stood their ground in Gaza and simply reported the truth. And they've done it in a very professional way, although it's been very personal to them. That has actually strengthened the narrative of their stories. And I would say to Dr. Janan that wherever they are being trained, I really salute lecturers like yourself, because they have brought a dignity to journalism that I would find very hard to be replicated anywhere else in the world. I'm just thinking of how personal it must have felt for the journalists who, like the people in Gaza, were being bombed, were being starved, were being denied power, water, all the basics that human beings need to exist on. And yet, despite it all, they carried on, even though they knew that they were under some sort of horrible death sentence by Israel that made it quite clear it was going to get rid of every eyewitness, professional eyewitness out there. Well, thanks to people like Anas al-Sharif, we can see Israel for exactly what it is, a rogue state, a pariah state. And if there were any decency in the world today, the BBC, CNN, the whole lot of them would refuse to report the narrative coming out of Tel Aviv because it is all lies. You know, not only are they bombing and persecuting these journalists, they're trying to destroy their reputation. And again, you know, citing, calling them Hamas commanders. And it's obscene, absolutely obscene. And I'm really disgusted that the Israeli press has also been very inactive. There's been some great investigations by the Israeli media exposing the duplicity and treachery of the government in Israel, but it's time they trained their investigative skills into what happened, what really happened on October the 7th, why Benjamin Netanyahu didn't react when he was told 10 days earlier that this awful event was going to happen. And that's the sort of investigative journalism we want to see in Israel today, and also to expose the deliberate targeting by the snipers. We've had so many forensic investigations, including the murder of Shireen Abu Akleh, and we know it is deliberate. And we need more countries like South Africa to step up to the plate and demand investigations and demand that the international criminal courts act and bring these people to account. You know, justice has to be seen to be done. There are millions marching and protesting around the world today because they know fine well that America is lying, Israel is lying, Britain is lying. Britain is just as complicit as America. And at the very time when Anas was murdered, Anas and his colleagues were targeted by bombs. At that very same time, there was an RAF plane flying over Gaza, gathering intelligence for the Israelis. I want to know if the RAF is complicit, and I will be writing to my MP to find out if Britain has had a hand in handing over intelligence about the journalists in Gaza, because this cannot continue. And Israel is gearing up now to what it's calling a final solution. They're even using the language of the Nazis. You know, there is a Holocaust in Gaza unfolding, and it is a Holocaust. And the Israelis, they've been through this. Previous generations have been through this. And why the hell they're sitting back and not bringing their government to account, I don't know. But they'll all end up going to hell.
Well, certainly. And also, I think, you know, when one looks at the voices within Israel, Dr. Yvonne, they've been silenced as well. 2 weeks ago, I hosted Gideon Levy from the Haaretz. I hosted a spokesperson from Bethlehem as well, when they obviously that report with regard to calling it a genocide for the very first time within Israel, calling it a genocide as well. that 80-odd page report as well that was presented. And again, I think what we found is mainstream media, giving some sort of coverage. But again, Dr. Yvonne, when one looks at that report, these are eyewitness accounts of what had actually been taking place, not only in Gaza, but also in your part of the world, Dr. Juman, on the West Bank, and also in Jerusalem as well. So despite these voices coming out from Israel as well, again, we see the arrogance and the response, obviously with blatant condemnation of even reports that came out of organizations like B'Tselem.
Well, a lot of these organizations are merely appeasers. And I'm sick of hearing people still today, talking about a two-state solution. It doesn't exist. It will never happen. It was never going to happen. And the behavior of the Israeli leaders have made that quite clear. They do not want a two-state solution. Well, my political party, the Workers' Party, doesn't want a two-state solution either. We say one state, one solution, one Palestine, and that is it. And that is doable because for centuries, the Palestinians have conducted their business quite peacefully with their Jewish cousins and their Christian neighbors, and everybody has rubbed along quite well. It's quite clear there is no room for Zionism in the Middle East, and there is no room for a two-state solution. We have to be realistic, and we have to make sure as well that this is what the Palestinian people want, which I'm sure it is, to go back to how things were. And we should do all we can in the international community to support them. But the global South must look upon us in the West with utter disgust. I'm ashamed of my country. I'm ashamed. My grandfather was in the RAF, and I am ashamed of the actions of the RAF in Akrotiri, Cyprus, spying on a nation that is being starved to death, that is, where is the justice? We need the international laws to kick in, and we need to get rid of America at the UN, because America is just a stumbling block. It's making a mockery of the UN.
I think obviously we've overrun a bit as well, but let's just go around the panel. Dr. Juman, just some final thoughts, and then we'll get to Zanele and yourself, Dr. Yvonne, just to say the final word.
I lived in the UK last year. It was really a nice experience, and I heard a lot of British people talking like Dr. Yvonne, which these voices I appreciate a lot, and all the effort that this kind of people do usually, I'm sure that it will have an impact on the decision maker, because because people who know about Palestine and who know the original story of the conflict, they talk as Dr. Yvonne. That they talk like what. They tell the same thing, what Dr. Yvonne said, and I appreciate that. And I think all the honorable people in the world, if they do what they can, it will make an impact. And Palestinians in West Bank and even in Gaza, they watch and they understand, they appreciate, and they feel like they are stronger. And I'm sure that one day peace will happen, and peace will we will see peace on this land. If you just look at the history of Palestine, there were lots of religions, lots of people who came to Palestine, and they were included. Not only Jewish people who came after the Holocaust, they were welcomed. They were really welcomed. And we as Palestinians, I feel like we are Canaanians who are the original of this land. I don't think that there is any problem to live with anybody who has or who believes in any in any religion, whatever it was. So Palestinians welcomed people coming expelled from India, from Pakistan, from all over the world, where they were tortured and excluded, and Palestinians understand and welcome them. So that's why you will find different religions, different beliefs in Palestine. So that's why this is what Palestine used to be, and this is what should be. It's not Islamic state, not Christian state, not Jewish state. So that's why I agree with the Dr. Yvonne with the one state solution, which is Palestine and all all people, Jews, Christians, Muslims, and or also people who don't have any religion. They are more welcome to live in Palestine as citizens equally, without any discrimination against them. Yeah, this is a hope.
Well, thank you for that, Dr. Juman. Zanele?
Yeah, the year 1948 has huge significance for both South Africa and Palestine, right? That was the year that we were both countries entered into this dark period of apartheid. And just as I stand on the shoulders of South African journalists who worked so hard, Henry Nxumalo, Nat Nakasa, Peter Makubane, who played such huge roles in bringing down the apartheid system here in South Africa, I believe that the work of Shireen and Hussam and Anas and all of their colleagues their stories are going to be told one day as part of the incredible fight that Palestinians put up and eventually won. And as South Africans, we are so looking forward to celebrating that day the same way Palestinians celebrated us when we were finally free.
Thank you for that, Dr. Yvonne.
Well, I think that when this is over and there is an end to everything, and even Sheikh Yassin, who was born in Palestine and co-founded Hamas, he said that Israel had a shelf life which would not go beyond 2027. I'm not quite sure what he based it on, but he was quite adamant about that. And I think that Israel will implode by its own hand. But South Africa has a role to play here, because there's going to be a great deal of forgiveness which is going to be needed all around that whole region, including neighboring Arab countries that have sat back and done very little. And I think that the way that South Africa overcame and forgave its enemies was something to behold. And I really think that South Africa has a very important role to play here to help the Palestinians, because the way I'm feeling at the moment, I can't forgive and forget, and I am not even Palestinian. But what I have seen has been absolutely horrific. And of course, we've been talking today about the journalists, but what about the healthcare workers? That wonderful, wonderful Dr. Hossam, I forget the rest of his name, but what's happened to him? He's we're talking, the Israelis tell us about their hostages. Well, what about the Palestinian hostages? What about Dr. Hossam, who was a great pediatrician and surgeon? What's happened to him? And so we've got an uphill struggle, and people like me have just got to keep on going and march and sign petitions and bang pots and pans. We've got the Vice President of America, J.D. Vance, in Scotland at the moment. hopefully he won't sleep tonight because there's a load of people outside his holiday home and they're banging pots and pans for Gaza. So we've got to keep up this form of resistance. You know, more than 500 people, priests, librarians, teachers, middle class England turned out and were arrested in Trafalgar Square. 540 of them arrested. I was arrested and charged in Edinburgh for allegedly giving support to a terrorist entity, which was a nonsense. The world has had enough of Zionism, and we've had enough of Tel Aviv interfering in our politics. Tel Aviv occupies Gaza, and it occupies politically Washington and London and Berlin. And the Germans, you know, they've never been on the right side of history, and their behavior is making us all look back and remembering how they behaved in the 1930s. So Germany needs to stand up as well.
Well, Dr. Yvonne, let's pray that Sheikh Yassin talking about 2027, because I've spoken to many a Palestinian, and they've always told me, and they said 2028, make sure you book your ticket, and we are going to meet in the courtyards of Al-Aqsa. And this is what the Palestinians have been telling me. And certainly we are looking forward to that day as well. But for now, to all my panelists this evening, Dr. Yvonne Ridley, Dr. Juman Quneis, and also to you, Zanele Mji, we thank you. We do appreciate you taking time out with us right here on Salam Media. We wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Well, that brings us to the end of tonight's edition of In Conversation with myself, Inayat Wadi. And I'd actually like to leave you with what I had actually begun with. And those were the last words of journalist Anas Al-Sharif, saying, if these words reach you, Israel has succeeded in killing me. And these are thoughts that run through every journalist, every person's mind in Gaza at this point in time. And his words are actually just so powerful, where he's actually entrusted us with a huge responsibility when he says, I entrust you with Palestine, the jewel in the crown of the Muslim world, the heartbeat of every free person in this world. I entrust you with its people, with its wronged and innocent children who never had the time to dream or live in safety and peace. I entrust you to take care of my family. I entrust you with my beloved daughter Sham, the light of my eyes, whom I never got a chance to watch grow up as I dreamed. I entrust you with my dear son Salah, whom I had wished to support and accompany through life until he grew strong enough to carry my burden and continue the mission. I entrust you with my beloved mother, whose blessed prayers brought me to where I am, whose supplications were my fortress, and whose light guided my path. I pray to Allah that Allah grants her strength and rewards her on my behalf with the best of rewards. And he says, I also entrust you with my lifelong companion, my beloved wife, Salah, from whom the war separated me for many long days and months, yet she remained faithful to our bond, steadfast as a trunk of an olive tree that does not bend, patient, trusting in Allah, and carrying the responsibility in my absence with all her strength and faith. I urge you to stand by them, to be their support after Allah Almighty. And these were very, very powerful words that Anas Al-Sharif had written. And these words will actually go down in history to bear witness and to bear testimony of the bravery, the dedication, the commitment, the sacrifices of each and every Palestinian to ensure that at the end of the day, they have been the chosen people, a few million people on behalf of an entire world that would stand up against injustice. And we continue praying for their well-being, for their safety, and we continue supporting them and praying for their freedom, for their liberation, because their liberation is our liberation. And with those thoughts, I'm going to be leaving you from myself and the team at Salam Media. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.